Yeah, and
I
to
just don't
touch
think you.
back on the learning aspect, right? Um, and if you're an expert on the subject, it's clear the AI tool probably doesn't have the same knowledge base. If you're novice to it, it'll produce results that you think are glorious, right? And so yeah, so there are concerns, right, with the cognitive offloading and what we are seeing in studies of in use of AI tools in undergrad and graduate level. Right. A failure to develop the skill before use of it has shown a reduction in skill development. And even if you do have the skills necessary to use the AI tools, constant reliance can result in atrophy if used inappropriately. Now, again, teaching aspect I think can really relate still in corporate space because if you're developing protocols of how to use it effectively as an enhancement, teaching the skills necessary for staff of what they need to understand before they even use it, I think that can still translate very well and be an effective strategy in using AI properly. Like, for example, when I was growing up, I thought I wanted to do genetics, right? And so I did an internship over at a amniocentesis office. Uh, and they had a computer tool in which it could assist you in karyotyping. Was I allowed to touch that program when they were teaching me karyotyping? Absolutely not. They instead had a box of cutout chromosomes that I had to manually set up the metric banding and pair the chromosomes myself so that I learned the skill to be able to then assess when using the computer
Nice.
program whether there was an inaccuracy, right? And so having protocols in place for a company to use it effectively by using, pedagogy applies everywhere else. It's still you're learning a skill and doing it properly, right? In the workplace, creating written policies, not just on the legal aspect, but on proper use aspect for effectiveness and quality, that it's very important. And of course, developing the skills necessary before use, and in limited ways.
So
Yeah,
I
makes a
I
lot of
think about
sense.
I think about high school, right? Or grade school. That sounds like, in math class, we're going through the proofs, and you're sitting there like, why do I need to learn
Mhm.
the proofs? But it helps you understand the mechanics and how things are put together. And, I'm always sitting there and I'm squirming. I'm like, just give me the formula. Just give me the formula. And, I remember hand drawing all the graphs and mapping the points. And it would take, I don't know, 30 minutes for one problem. And then they're like, okay, fine, you've got it. And you kind of evolve into those other, you know, quicker manners. But I think it's only after you've mastered, the foundation. I think that's kind of what Parker was talking about. Books. You start with the foundation and you understand it, and then it's almost like old school used to have to then apply it in order to
Right.
understand it. Now, I mean, I could totally see LLMs or whatever you want to call it being a shortcut, a hack, and that's
Yeah.
that's that's a problem.
But you were talking about things like, atrophy from not using it, not doing these things.
Yes.
I mean, I can think of different examples. I can't remember anybody's phone number anymore. I used to. I
Yeah.
remember phone numbers all the time because
Yeah.
that's just what you had to do. Well, I don't have to do that
Mhm.
anymore. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody's phone number, and you just don't have to. But I think, even with the meeting notes, one of the things I was thinking about, my handwriting is atrocious, right? So when I'm making notes, even my own ability to go back and read those may be questionable. But what I've found is more often than not, the act of writing it out
Yes.
just sticks it in my brain more. So it's nice that it's all getting recorded and it's being transcribed, although nobody ever goes back and looks. It just turns to spam. It just gets sent everywhere.
Correct.
I wonder then if, okay, but things are, you're not being actively involved in that piece. Is it not solidifying your brain as much as it would if you were more physically involved instead of just offloading it?
Absolutely. Like the canoes aspect for doing all that is important, not only in real world, but also in education too. I will require my students, if they want to bring any notes for the final, they got to handwrite them in their book, no printed anything, because I force them to use that aspect of learning to encourage, like getting them up what we call Bloom's taxonomy for pedagogy. Yeah. And so absolutely losing those skills, again, use it or lose it.
Right.
So So would my AI auto pen, would that pass the sniff test of my handwritten notes for your class? I'm just curious if I could bypass that.
Right. No, we'd have to have a conversation about that. Assess it next.
So Sam, I have a question for you about,
Sure.
you're in academics, obviously, right?
Yes.
And you require papers to be written and whatever, you require of your student. How do you guard against someone using AI, not for a test, that you can control that environment, but hey, they have a paper due on such and such a subject. How do you guard against someone just regurgitating an AI document?
Yeah. So in law school and graduate level law school programs, we actually have very few opportunities for them to be graded except for the final. And there's very few, right? But let's say we're in a writing course like contract drafting, right? Which is a course I teach. It's very easy for me as an expert to spot when somebody is not utilizing the skills I had taught and instead using AI tools to try to just create rather than enhance. Because I actually have a class where I teach them how to use AI properly. And this actually ties into what I think companies could be doing of doing a pros and cons assessment of like how AI can benefit in the workspace and what tools are appropriate, and then write protocols on it. Um, I do teach them the correct language models that they can use by the correct uh, legal research and resources. I teach them, enhancement, not creation. But yeah, if somebody wanted to try to draft an entire contract using AI for my class, I mean, the good news is, at least in my case, I'm an expert enough to be able to spot it and go, okay, this is absolute crap, right? Because it doesn't follow. AI is not going to be able to follow the guidelines. But another way academics can try to get around the AI generated content can actually be opinion based pieces. And so when we ask more opinion focused questions in certain prompts, it definitely helps to reduce the ability of the student to solely rely on AI. Because sure, you could ask like, hey, what's the answer to this particular issue? Right. And yes, AI could potentially answer that properly. Even though it's pretty clear for us, it's easy to spot when someone's just written in that fashion. Um, you could do that, but again, the opinion-based questions really help kind of weed that out more. That's normally what we've done to try to avoid that. And again, in my contract drafting class, it's clear as day to me when someone's used AI because it was never meant to be used in the way that they're using it if they're using it inappropriate. I have a very specific set of how they can use it.
Makes sense.
Are your students scared of you, Sam?
Huh?
Are your, st-
Their
are your, st-
students love her.
I'm kind of getting scared of
Oh,
you
my
right now.
students, actually, I am very grateful that I have a lovely base of students who show their appreciation for me as I appreciate them. I tend to, I'm surprised I've been giving off an air of intimidation as normally I walk into my classroom, throw confetti the first day of class and just start like screaming like a wild woman. Like in a laughing way. Like I just like, surprise, welcome to Scared. Like so this air of intimidation is quite interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
I'm scared. I don't know. I can't speak for the other guys on the panel here, but I don't know if I'd want to take your class. I probably flunk, but what?
you would
Well,
definitely flunk.
Yeah.
luckily my evals tell me my students appreciate. I've been lucky that they notate very often how caring and understanding I am when I do teach the material because I understand the materials I teach are rather complicated.
Very
So
good.
thinking about kind of on the business side again,
Mhm.
right? Like yesterday, within the last couple of days, right? We actually had a request from somebody on the team to allow a third party tool. And it required us to open up some hooks, right? And we may or may not have been able to secure that, but we ultimately decided that we didn't want to do that, right? And in the short term, we can just kind of tell everybody no every time they ask. There'll be some folks that don't know or don't ask. But one of the things I was thinking about is, you know, where you kind of start, right? Sam, you talked about kind of a pros and cons and whatnot. I was
Yes.
also thinking about, policy, right? Even Because I look at, even you put a policy in there, there may be some things you can't control, but at least you've established this is what the expectation it is.
Right.
And people don't know, then they have no guidance on, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to not do that? And it seems a little different with AI too. The things that we may have to share with them, like, don't just dump a customer question into AI and then send it back to them. That may have to talk about how you use AI for communication and whatnot. But what do you think about that in terms of where you start? If you're an
Yeah.
organization, you're like, okay, we want to figure out what we can do, what we can't do. You talked about, I guess, pros and cons as kind of a starting point.
Right. So I'll use the example from the way I teach contract drafting and then apply it to corporate. Right. So with pros and cons in contract drafting AI use, right? First off, I start off with the principle of it can never be used to create a contract, a template, a precedent, anything. You treat it like an art tool. Okay. You treat it like a drawing. Like you have to create the initial piece of art, but then you can use tools to enhance the final product. And what those pros can be of enhancement and not creation is, you can use it specifically for deconstructing certain types of provisions, finding rewordings that sound more human, but still developing the skill of drafting those things without the tool first. And the pros to that can be efficiency, volume management,
Mm.
consistency of materials, comparing, right? It can be used potentially as a training tool. There can be certain outcome predictions when you're comparing other contracts you've drafted in the past to the current contract and certain facts. But of course, there's cons of use like data set limitations, right? I'll tell them AI can only perform as well as its relevant training data. There can be some, hallucination issues. There's, of course, regulatory and ethical constraints, right? Of the way that for in legal realm, malpractice concerns of, we've seen those old cases already where, whatever lawyer was using AI without even thinking. And, but
Right.
then, of course, there's intellectual property concerns. And so, um, in that way, how does this translate right to other sectors, right? Well, you can take what I've said for those things, think about the type of service that's provided, and then create a policy that is more like this is the restricted way unless we say otherwise. And then over time it can expand. I think that's the safest way, more conservative approach to it, right? Is here are X amount of ways in which we permit you to use this particular AI tool that we have approved, right? And no other AI tools can be used that have not been approved by the company unless, there's a conversation about this, it's vetted, etc. But these are the particular uses. And then over time, you know, it much like common law, right? Things change over time, cases happen, new things happen that maybe a new use case can be provided by staff, that there's a policy that they want to use it in a different way. They go approach upper management, and then they can walk through that, and then maybe the policy is amended, because these policies not only need to be drafted but regularly amended, right? They need to be in
Right.
writing. They need to be particularly limited and can be expanded over time, change. But I think that's incredibly important, is to not only have a written policy that's more conservative in use, but also regularly amended. It's a perpetual document, right?
Okay.
At least that's
So,
my take on it when it
Yeah.
comes to
so Sam,
use rather than just solely legal, right?
Gotcha.
the challenge I see, right, and I agree with you. The policy needs to be, constantly evolving as things need. But the issue I run into is like, okay, great, I've got this awesome policy and tells me how I should do it and how I shouldn't do this thing. The real issue is how do I enforce it,
Yeah.
right? Or how do I even
Mhm.
validate that someone's even following the policy? Because it's not like I'm going to be sitting over everyone's shoulder making sure they're using their AI tools properly. I mean, that's just
Right.
not possible. So that's been our biggest challenge from the security and governance compliance pieces. I love writing good policy and I love having it to fall back onto, but then when somebody says, "Well, is this being enforced, or is this even enforceable?" Like at the end of the
Yeah.
day, is like, how do you make
Well,
this a reality? Go
well,
ahead,
what
Terry.
are the pieces that you could enforce? Now, maybe you don't want to because the cost and the effort to try and enforce it, but
Mhm.
I mean, what are some, like, maybe some practical things that, well, you can at least do these things? Like, I don't know how you would stop somebody from having an AI on their phone and simply recording a conversation. I don't know how you would do that, but are there other things that you would say, here's some things you can do to at least try to protect your corporate data or control, different things that you want to try and secure.
Sure. I mean, from my side of it, the very simple correlation here is like content filtering has been in existence for a long time now. Right? Like, hey, you can't go to this type of website. You can't go to websites that have this type of content on there. We just adapt that same principle to the same thing, which is like we can do content filtering for Gen AI as an example. You can't go to ChatGPT as a website, or we can make it to where we're actually looking at the traffic going into it. So you can get to the website, but the moment you say, I'm typing in a social security number, no, stop this right here, and you can control it. But that has to be within your realm of control. So to your point about like, hey, the person has their phone, unless my content filtering is passing through in some capacity on their phone, I can't control that. So to your point, we start with within the workspace. Here's the tools. If you're inside my network, I make that the boundary line, and we can do content filtering. And that's just one example of this as it relates to like Gen AI or anything like that. But it's it's all the same principles that we fought before, like the same thing like we were talking about, like shadow IT. I just need to
Right.
know what website you're going to. I need to know what applications you're installing your endpoint. And then we create a rule set that says if the policy, like Sam wrote the policy enforces and says, hey, we're not going to allow anybody to use this AI tool. Well, then all we have to do is enforce and say at the endpoint, you can't open this, you can't install this or whatever. And these are again, that's no different than what we've done to enforce. Just you're now enforcing it on this one particular app set instead of holistically whatever else. I mean, going back, I mean, for the most part, is like the main thing is at the corporate workplace is we wouldn't allow people to go to pornography websites, right? I mean, that was like a no. Right? It was a
Right.
very simple,
Right.
like, we're going to stop this from going to it. So the same function exists at every level. It's just now targeting AI. So we don't have to change the tool sets really. For the most part, it's just the focus of attention needs to be shifted to it. So that's the first part, I think. But the second piece, Terry, you hit the nail on the head. Is like I can't really stop somebody from bringing their phone, pulling out, hitting record, but I could make it to where they can't bring their phone in the room, right? Like I mean, this has been true for like the military. I mean, you go to the skiff, okay, drop your phone in here. Now you're going into this secure area. That's just it's the same principles apply. You just have to put it into a different method. We've had like man traps in buildings, like where you go through
Right.
turnstile. Okay, you're in this area, empty your pockets,
Mhm.
before you proceed to the next area. If that's the level that we have to get to, if our concern is around like data exposure or anything like that. But I think that's really where the question should come to is like, are we going to start taking it to that level of like scrutiny and seriousness, or is it going to be status quo because it's like, hey, it's not really hurting anything until it hurts something. It's the same issue we had with ransomware, right? I mean, like
Mm.
malware became ransomware. It's like we were doing the same things, but it's like, are you going to change the way you do business because of this? Because it's become now that's the new model. And not every organization has adapted that. And that's why they keep getting hit with the same problems over and over again. Because the bad guys are going to constantly evolve what they're doing. We've got to make sure that we evolve in our stance as well, or you're going to fall victim as well.
Well, and that's when I think about like for us, like when you talked about the recording, right? And a lot of it's remote too. So if you're talking remote, even then it's harder to kind of control that. You can have a policy though. And I think about if somebody's really just doing it for convenience, there is no malicious intent. They're just like, wow, I really think this is convenient. But if you have a policy that says we don't allow that, and if we find out you're doing it, it could be grounds for termination. Maybe they don't do it because they're like, it's not worth it. The other
Yeah.
thing that I think about is it's one thing to record in our world, right? We're a sales organization. Um, I guess two things. One, making everyone aware you're going to record something. But also, I think if you're recording something internally, may be different than you're recording a customer's conversation, right? They may not like that at all. That may be
Right.
very different. And if that customer finds out that you did it and they didn't know, maybe they get upset and they say they don't want to work with you anymore. So I think
Right.
there's some social considerations and your paycheck if you're in a sales capacity and you irritate your customer with something you think was just well I was just capturing the notes, it's extra convenient for me, but they don't look at it that same way. They look at it as an invasion of privacy.
Yeah, and we get to a certain point too where it's like, that threshold of do we consider any policy to really matter anyway, depending on whether or not we think, it can be enforced or not? I mean, people will violate company policies left and right. There's always somebody who's going to violate some policy, right?
Yeah.
And I really
Paul
liked
does
what
it every day.
Yeah, there you go.
I really liked what John had to say too about like mechanisms of actual enforcement, and then to actually have teeth. What should we call it? And then we have excuse me, my brain just for a second. There's just so much going on. But then
You've been
of course,
cognitive offloading, Sam.
That's
yeah,
right.
right. I did the cognitive offloading there.
Yeah.
Um, but
That's why we record these, Sam, so we can, edit little dead spots out. Don't worry.
well, I
Well,
appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, no, it gets to a point where it's like, where philosophically are we talking about that versus like really anybody complying with these sorts of policies in the first place?
right.
Oh, and
Yeah,
then of
that's
course, sorry, what I was going to say is, right, what technology are they allowed to use, right? I'm sure, John, you already know, like an old part of controls has been company issuance of hardware, right? And so when companies are the ones in control of what hardware the staff has, that also helps with enforcement with these particular policies that are all, again, AI just simply happens to be another form of some sort of program that, much like any other program, can be controlled in similar ways.
Mr. Parker, let me ask you this. I think most companies issue hardware like laptops, desktops, and all that. Do you have a feel out there for which percentage issue like mobile devices?
Very few now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
and it's a weird thing to say it like that because you'll go into an organization that maybe it's a massive organization, they'll issue a million phones, and so it skews the numbers. But if you think of it just from the business side of it, it's less and less, right? They might have a phone or like how there was a pager, right? That's been handed
Right.
around. Same kind of thing is more common in that approach if there's like an on-call rotation, but it's become standard now. This is the same thing with the internet, right? Everyone kind of generally has the internet at their house, and before in the early days, it's like, oh, well, I'll pay for your internet at your house so that you can work
Yeah.
from home. That model has really shifted away, and it's just assumed, which poses a problem, right? When we're talking about enforcement around these things, because again, you can have good policy that says don't do these things or whatever, but if you're using your personal phone for work, right? Nothing's really going to stop you from doing it. And Sam hit the nail on the head. Is like people are just going to break rules until they're caught, or it becomes overtly malicious in nature. Something that no one's really going to do anything about it until it's a problem. So to answer your question, is like not really, but that's why the technology is evolving. Things like the big one is like enterprise browsers, right? Is hey, instead of us issuing you a laptop, we're going to give you a browser that you can install on your computer, and you do your work inside the browser, but the computer's yours. So it's sandbox it away over here, and we do this. That's that shifting model mentality. Is like, okay, we know, we're not going to issue everyone a laptop anymore or a phone, but this is how we can do our business, especially in the ever-growing cloud space with everything's a SaaS-based tool.
Right.
We've moved so far away from I needed to have this thick client on my computer to do my
Yeah.
job. I mean, like just this meeting right now, it's all cloud hosted. So same concept, right? I think we've shifted away from this issuing of devices for the most part, and at least cell phones. Maybe laptops eventually will catch up in that way because maybe we can do all our business from our phones. We'll see. But because of that, you're losing some of your control to do enforcement around these things. So I know our big topic is around AI. I don't have a good answer for it because it's really, you're going to spend money in a different way. So maybe before I issued a laptop and I had all the controls in the world to stop you from doing whatever, and now I don't. So I lose those controls unless I go find the next tool that you're going to have to agree to put on your personal device, and that's
Yeah.
a whole different
Well,
conversation around,
yeah. Well, and
what you're
especially
going to let that happen.
yeah, it's I mean, we used to have that too. I watched companies that would try to issue phones. They became so personal to everybody that you could not make everybody happy with a phone. It just didn't matter, right? Because you're going to have these people that have to have these ones.